BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of Astro Psych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Alright, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays this year, I've been doing a regular segment about Jack the Ripper, and this episode is going to be a little bit different. But before we truly begin, I would like to drop a couple of announcements and reminders. The first is that there is a regular segment about the Zodiac Killer, which comes out every Monday here on BBOR, and on the weekends I've launched a new regular show about the murder of Jean-Benet Ramsey from 1996, and the Anything Goes Friday segment is still going strong. But with the Ripper series, I did some recent episodes on two of the suspects, Charles Lechbeer and Aaron Kospinski, and there are going to be many more suspect videos to come. But I've been reading the book Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer by Zed Simpson, and something else stood out to me, and that is talking about the possible victims that could have been murdered by Jack the Ripper. And in this case, I'll be discussing the story of Rose Mylet for the episode. And before we completely begin again, you can hit the like button, subscribe, follow along with the channel, visit BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88. But to jump right into things, I was reading the book and I came across this particular page. One of the women who died shortly after the murder of Mary Kelly was Rose Mylet, whose body was found in December of 1888. The reason she is not considered by all to have been a Ripper victim is in part a matter of geography. Her body was not found in Whitechapel but in nearby Poplar, but there was also a number of differences between her death and that of the canonical five. Authorities initially wondered whether she was spared mutilation simply because the killer was disturbed before he had a chance to act, or whether she was murdered by another predator altogether. Robbery does not seem to have been a motive since she was still in the possession of some money, but that would not have ruled out a crime of passion or simple brutality. Some went so far as to claim that even though a jury ruled it a willful murder, she actually died a natural death, and no suspect was ever found. And once again, that is from the book Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer by Zed Simpson. Now, the Ripper was not only a serial killer, but a spree killer. The first Ripper crime officially occurred on August 31st of 1888 with the murder of Polly Nichols, and concluded with the murder of Mary Kelly on November 9th of 1888, a very short time frame for a serial killer. There are also three communications that are given strong possibility as to have come from the real killer: the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter. Now, the previously mentioned murder of Mary Kelly is thought by some to have been the final Ripper crime, and other people think that the Ripper crimes continued, as you see, including the murder of Rose Mylet. But this book, as I've said before, Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer, is more or less an A4 paper size. It's a large print book, and there are full-page images of the murder of Mary Kelly and her body after the crime took place. And no matter what, no matter how many times I've seen those images, They are just absolutely sickening. I don't even want to show them here on Black Box Online Radio. And whatever theory people have about Jack the Ripper and this particular killer, it's just a reminder that there are some sick and twisted people in the world, and there are some very disturbing things that happen in the world, and I don't think I ever get used to it, no matter how closely we follow true crime cases. But I just happened to have been reading the book, and it was talking about the murder of Rose Mylet, and there are some other points that stood out to me, which I'll share throughout this episode, but she is definitely not the most famous possible Ripper victim. I mean, I would propose that the murder of Martha Tabram is an even more widely accepted possible Ripper victim, or many people think that she was murdered by the Ripper, even though I certainly do not. I would love to do an episode on her story in the near future. However, Rose Mylet was born in 1862 and passed away in 1888. She was also known as Catherine Mylett, or even Drunken Lizzie, Lizzie Davis, and Fair Alice Downey. And this is another point that has been discussed, and that is that it was normal to use aliases at the time. And I even did an episode not talking about a story from England, but one on the Basin Street murder, which took place in New Orleans, and you can find that here on Black Box Online Radio under that same title, The Basin Street Murder. And it's talking about how there wasn't any type of electronic database to record people's identities. It was very normal to use an alias. I mean, people did it because they got away with it, more or less. You can even look at the story of Charles Litchmere, Jack the Ripper suspect, and how he used the alias Charles Cross. But I'm going to go over to a post from casebook.org on Rose Mylet. Born Catherine Mylett on December 8th of 1859. I mean, it's really odd that it says that when this exact same page says she was born in 1862. The wonderful internet. Rose Mylet, according to her mother, was once married to a man by the name of Davis, but for some unknown reason they had split up by 1888. She had one daughter with him named Florence, born on September 12th of 1880, who was attending school in Sutton at the time of her mother's death. Rose had lived in various lodging houses over the years, ranging from the Limehouse and Poplar district and 18 George Street to her mother's lodgings in Pelham Street north of Hanbury, Baker's Row. Because of her proclivity to drink, friends and acquaintances in Whitechapel knew Rose by the name Drunken Lizzie Davis, as well as Mylett or Mylett. In Poplar she was known as Fair Alice Downey. Again, according to her mother who identified the body, her true name was Catherine Mylett. On December 19th to December 20th of 1888, 7:55 p.m., Rose Mylet is seen by Charles Ptolemy, an infirmary night attendant, speaking with two sailors in Poplar Street near Clark's Yard. She appeared to have been sober, and she was heard by Ptolemy to have said no, no, no to one of them. Their manner of conduct was suspicious enough so as to bring attention to themselves. At 2:30 a.m., Alice Graves spots Mylett outside of the George in Commercial Road with two men. Rose Mylet appeared to have been drunk. 4:15 a.m., Police Sergeant Robert Golding, on patrol at the time, came across the lifeless body of an unidentified woman, Rose Mylet, in the yard between 184 and 186 Poplar High Street in Clark's Yard. The body was still warm and left on its side. Rose Mylet was a known prostitute, and her body was found only 2 miles from the center of Whitechapel, where the Whitechapel murders took place. Police suspicion and public suspicion grew concerning the case, and the hush had befallen the public since the dreadful Kelly murder a month and a week before had been quickly disrupted. Once again, the Ripper's name was spoken aloud. The possessions Rose Mylet had. The body of Rose Mylet possessed the following: a brown and black set of outer clothes, dark tweed jacket, lilac apron, red flannel petticoat, red and blue striped stockings, and cash was on her. So I guess that goes back to that whole thing that Sid Simpson was talking about. Was this a murder, or was this a robbery gone wrong? Well, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like that robbery was the primary motive, because someone didn't even take all of her money. Now, one thing that I thought about immediately was someone could have taken some of her money, then gotten startled and ran away, but I mean, that's just a possibility, and I don't even think that that's quite most likely. It seems like either murder was the primary function here, or, as Zed Simpson also stated, there could be another thing that led to her death. Death was confirmed by Divisional Surgeon Dr. Matthew Brownfield's assistant, Harris, but at first the doctors were at a loss as to what had caused the death. It did not seem like a Ripper murder, as the throat was not cut, and there were no easily visible wounds anywhere on the body, but it wasn't until a faint mark resembling the imprint of a string was found around her neck that strangulation was first suggested. And this is the post-mortem report prepared by Matthew Brownfield. Blood was oozing from the nostrils, and there was a slight abrasion to the right side of the face. On the neck, there was a mark which had evidently been caused by a cord drawn tightly around the neck from the spine to the left ear. Such a mark would have been made by a 4-thread cord. There was also an impression of the thumb and middle index finger of some person plainly visible on the neck. There were no injuries to the arms or legs. And I think that already there are some immediate differences between the Ripper victims and the murder of Rose Mylet. The Ripper is not primarily a killer. Can I say that again? Jack the Ripper is not primarily a killer. With the majority of the Ripper victims, the primary focus was mutilation, and that's with the murders of Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Catherine Eddowes, and, of course, Mary Kelly. But with the possible Ripper victim, Long Liz Stride, who was murdered in the double event the same night as Catherine Eddowes, her body was not mutilated, but her throat was slashed. And you guys who have been following this series know that I lean towards something called the Frederick Best Confession, which occurred in 1931, when a journalist named Frederick Best confessed to the crimes. Excuse me. The only crime he confessed to was forgery, obstruction of justice, lying about fabricating 2 letters, fabricating 2 of the Jack the Ripper communications, not all of them, and those would be the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard. And I think the biggest connection that Liz Stride's murder has to the Ripper case is the Saucy Jackie postcard, where the person is saying, there was a double event tonight. The first one squealed a bit, so he couldn't do his thing. That's why the Ripper had to find another victim, and it's possible within 15 minutes that person who murdered Catherine Eddowes was with her. But I see the real connection from Liz Stride's murder to the Ripper case being that the Saucy Jackie postcard. And what I said in the past was 51% I thought that the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard were indeed forgeries of Frederick Best. But the reason why it's 51%, I mean, just leaning that way a little bit, is it's possible that that's not true. I mean, it's very difficult to substantiate a confession like that. But if we look at the Ripper narrative, it has been established that, alright, this person has not only confessed, but also provided a reason as to why these crimes were committed in that particular way. I mean, there's an explanation that's as clear as day. The first one squealed a bit, so the Ripper couldn't mutilate her, so he went after a different victim, and that's why 2 women were murdered in the same night. And I think the only possibility that someone could use to connect the murder of Rose Mylet to the Ripper case is that same thing, that the Ripper was about to mutilate her, but got startled and ran away. And the other reason why I wanted to talk to you guys about this is something that a lot of you are probably already thinking about, and that is that the murder of Rose Mylet occurred on December 20th of 1888. The first crime committed by the Zodiac killer occurred on December 20th of 1968. And this is just going on the giant list of similarities between Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac killer. A possible Ripper crime occurred on December 20th, and the first Zodiac crime occurs on December 20th, and it doesn't take too much imagination to see how somebody would be thinking about No, they're not going to choose a date like August 31st, 1888. I mean, that would be so obvious that the Zodiac is just trying to recreate Jack the Ripper, but failing to do so, because the Zodiac was a win compared to the vicious nature of the Ripper. No, choosing a date like December 20th of 1888 and December 20th of 1968, meaning that there were Ripper inspirations. However, there was just a little bit of mystery is still involved. Now, I could be completely wrong about how Jack the Ripper was an inspiration for the Zodiac Killer, but there's no 51% there. 100%. I believe the Ripper inspired the Zodiac. 100% I believe the Zodiac was trying to turn himself into some type of 20th century Jack the Ripper. He was just really bad at it and also somewhat of a coward and a weakling. But let's go over to jacktheripper.org and look at the story of Rose Mylet. The Return of the Ripper. At 7:55 p.m. on Wednesday, December 19th, Charles Ptolemy was making his way along England Row off of Poplar High Street when he saw a woman in the company of two sailors by the entrance of Clark's Yard on the opposite of High Street. One sailor was around 5 feet 11 inches tall, and in Ptolemy's opinion looked like a Yankee, and the other one was about 5 feet 7 inches tall. Ptolemy later recalled that the shorter one was talking to a woman whom he later identified as Rose Mylet. When he was taken her to view her body at the mortuary, whilst the taller of the two was walking up and down. So strange did it seem, he later told the Daily Chronicle, that I stopped to take an account of them. He then heard the woman say, "No, no, no," and the shorter seaman speak to her in a low tone. It struck me that they were there for no good purpose, he later recalled, and that was the reason why I took so much notice of their movements. I shall always remember their faces, and I could pick them out of 1,000. He also stressed that he had seen Rose Mylet, and she seemed perfectly sober. At 2:30 a.m. on the morning of December 20th, she was seen by Alice Graves in the company of two men by the George Pub on Commercial Road, and she appeared drunk. Her body is found, but foul play is not suspected. At 4:30 a.m., Police Sergeant Robert Golding and Police Constable Thomas Costello found her dead in Clark's Yard. Her body was still warm, suggesting that death had only occurred a short time before, according to a later report by Metropolitan Police Commissioner James Monroe. The face was perfectly placid. The clothes were not disarranged around the neck, and the handkerchief loosely folded, but not tied. In the pocket of the dress was a small vial empty, and in one of the ears was an earring, the other was missing. There were absolutely no signs whatsoever of any sign of a struggle, and no marks of visible violence. Well, if what we have read just recently was true, then it turned out there was a cord that was placed around her neck and she was strangled. I mean, I think that can make a little bit more sense that foul play is to be suspected, but these are the initial observations. Dr. George James Harris was sent for, and having carried out a cursory examination of the body in the course of which he found no marks or signs of foul play, he pronounced life extinct and ordered the body to be removed. Here the mortuary keeper, coroner's assistant, Curtin T. Chivers, discovered a mark around the neck, which was indeed 1/8 of an inch deep, with some scratches above it. The post-mortem disagrees with the police. A post-mortem was subsequently ordered and was duly carried out on the 21st of December, 1888, by Divisional Police Surgeon Matthew Brownfield. His findings stated as the subsequent report, as presented, that that the inquest of Rose Mylet's death that was held the same day were as follows. Blood was oozing from the nostrils, and there was a slight abrasion to the right side of the face. On the neck there was a mark that had evidently been caused by a cord tightly around the neck, from the spine to the ear. Such a mark would have been made by a 4-thread cord. So, it seems like she was murdered. I mean, it seemed like she was also strangled, but was that the Ripper? Another way to respond to this is that murders took place in Whitechapel, murders took place in Poplar, murders took place in England, and, I mean, this is even after the murder of Mary Kelly, after the Ripper's confirmed crime spree has ended. And this just goes to show us that people in vulnerable situations get murdered. And rest in peace to Rose Mylet. She didn't deserve to be murdered like this. But as I was talking about the vicious nature of humanity and the sick and twisted nature of humanity, other people were murdered in Whitechapel and in Poplar, and not all of the crimes had to have been the Ripper. And to be honest with you, I'm not seeing an enormous amount of Ripper similarities in this case. An inquest into this transpired that the police were unaware of Brownfield's conclusion that Rose Mylet had been murdered, and therefore, since they were still of the opinion that her death had been accidental, they had not launched an initial investigation. I mean, that section was called Police Embarrassment, actually. And JackTheRipper.org has another question that I think everyone has been waiting for. Had Jack the Ripper returned? Inevitably, the question was soon being raised as to whether or not this new atrocity spelled the return of Jack the Ripper. The police and the majority of the newspapers seem to have been anxious to dispel any rumors that Rose Mylet had been the work of the Ripper. Indeed, there seems to have been a marked determination by the press to avoid so much panic and unrest in the wake of previous killings. So, if I had to make a decision now, I would state that no, I don't think she was murdered by the Ripper. It's possible. I suppose anything's possible. However, we aren't even quite sure how many killers were involved with the Ripper crimes. As I said, I think that there's a very low chance that Liz Stride was even murdered by Jack the Ripper, if there is indeed a single serial killer, or a spree killer, or someone who's actually mutilating women in England back in 1888. So, I also noticed that there is something that is also discussed in Zed Simpson's book, and that is called the Jack the Ripper complex, talking about how people just have to connect other crimes to Jack the Ripper. It's the same with the Zodiac killer. Every unsolved mystery gets connected to the Zodiac killer case, and as we're seeing very clearly, every other unsolved murder or suspicious death is going to be connected to Jack the Ripper. But what do you think? Do you notice any similarities between the murder of Rose Mylet and the other Ripper crimes? I would love to know what you guys think. You can put your ideas in the comments section below. One more time, you can visit BlackBoxOnlineRadio on Instagram, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNet88. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook's in the description box. And I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.